The ceremony had barely begun when the Admiral's eyes locked on a man in the back row. His clothes were worn, his boots cracked, his posture humble. None of that mattered. What froze the Admiral was the tattoo on the man's forearm. It was the mark of a unit that had been wiped out years ago. A unit no one outside a classified circle even knew existed. What city are you watching from today? If this story resonated with you, hit subscribe for more real stories about extraordinary people. The graduation field buzzed with families, cheering for their sons and daughters. Flags moved gently in the wind. Proud parents held cameras, flowers, and dreams. In the far corner stood Ethan Hawley, a young cadet who had spent 4 relentless years fighting to become an officer. Today was supposed to be the proudest day of his life. He kept scanning the crowd, hoping to see one face. His father? A man he barely spoke about. A man he believed had abandoned him. Every year he waited for a letter. Every year nothing came. So Ethan stopped expecting anything from him. Then, just before the cadets marched forward, a figure stepped through the gates, thin, weathered, wearing a jacket that had seen storms and streets. Ethan's heart lurched. His father had come. He did not walk toward the front. He stayed behind everyone as if afraid he might stain the ceremony with his presence. Ethan felt a bitter knot form in his chest. He wanted to be proud, but he feared the judgment around him. Whispers rose among a few cadets and parents. Some noticed the man's worn-out clothes. Some wondered who had allowed him inside. Ethan heard 2 cadets behind him mutter that someone should move the vagrant away from the reserved section. Ethan clenched his jaw. His father, Samuel Hawley, kept his gaze low as he held a small folded paper. It looked like something he had written many times before. Maybe a speech. Maybe an apology. Ethan could not tell. When the Admiral stepped onto the stage, everyone stood tall. Admiral Rowan was a man with a sharp presence and a mind that forgot nothing. He addressed the crowd with authority, honoring the sacrifices that shaped every graduate on that field. As he spoke, his attention drifted again to the man in the back row. The graduation slowed in his mind when he recognized the ink on the stranger's arm. A black trident crossed with a lightning bolt. Only one team in his entire career had carried that mark. The men who bore it had vanished on a classified mission that was never spoken of again. Most were considered dead. Those who survived were ghosts by choice. The Admiral's voice tightened for a moment. He continued his speech, but his eyes kept returning to that tattoo. As the ceremony progressed, Ethan's resentment deepened. He remembered nights his mother cried alone. You remember birthdays with an empty chair. He remembered a man who smiled with kindness, yet left without explanation. Why now? Why show up after so many years? When the cadets lined up to receive their commissions, the families moved closer. Samuel took one step forward, then hesitated. He looked ready to leave. Ethan saw it. That familiar disappearing act. The one that had defined his childhood. Anger flared inside. Ethan. He wanted to shout something. Anything. But he remained still. His moment on that stage was seconds away. Then Admiral Rowan made a surprising motion. He handed the microphone to the officer beside him and stepped down from the stage. The entire crowd watched as he walked straight toward the man in the back row. Ethan froze. Everyone did. The Admiral stopped in front of Samuel Hawley and stood at attention. Not a greeting. Not a handshake. A stance of respect. The crowd fell silent. Even the cadets shifted in confusion. The Admiral spoke with a firm voice that carried across the field. Sir, I believed your unit never returned. Samuel lifted his head. His eyes were tired but steady. Some of us made it back. We just did not know how to live afterward. Ethan felt his knees weaken. Admiral Rowan continued. For years I have told stories of your team. Their bravery. Their sacrifice. I never expected to meet one of them here. Samuel nodded slowly. I came for my son. I missed too much already. The Admiral turned to the crowd. His tone shifted from formal to reverent. Ladies and gentlemen, Standing before you is a man who served in one of the most classified rescue operations our nation ever carried out. A man whose actions saved lives that can never be publicly honored. A quiet wave moved across the field. Those who had whispered now looked ashamed. Ethan's eyes filled with heat. He saw his father differently now. Not as a broken figure from the streets. Not as a parent who abandoned him without care. But as a man who carried wounds too deep for ordinary life. The Admiral placed a hand on Samuel's shoulder. You do not stand in the back today. Come with me. He guided Samuel toward the front, past the rows of decorated parents, past the cadets who stared in awe, and stopped right beside Ethan. Ethan's breath trembled. Samuel looked at him with a softness that seemed to fight through years of guilt. I wanted to come sooner, Samuel said. I just did not know if I still deserved a place in your life. Ethan's voice came out tight. You're here now. When his name was called, Ethan stepped forward with his father standing beside him. Admiral Rowan handed him his commission, then faced Samuel. Your son honors you, just as your service honored this nation. Tears slipped down Samuel's face. Ethan placed a steady hand on his father's arm. For the first time, he felt the connection that had been missing for so long. After the ceremony ended and the crowd began to disperse, Ethan and Samuel walked across the field together. Samuel admitted that after his mission, he had been unable to adjust. He carried nightmares he never spoke of. He drifted from place to place, believing distance would protect his son from the broken pieces of him. Ethan listened in silence. He finally understood that abandonment had not come from lack of love. It had come from a man crushed by battles no metal could heal. They sat on a bench as the sun lowered behind the buildings. Ethan handed his father the folded paper that was sticking from his pocket. Inside was a speech Samuel had written. Words of pride. Words of regret. Words he thought he would never be brave enough to say out loud. Ethan read it. Then he looked at the man who had struggled for years to find his way back. You made it, Ethan said. That is what matters. Samuel nodded with a quiet relief. For the first time in many years, he felt seen. Not as a ghost of his past. Not as a homeless stranger. But as a father whose courage went beyond the battlefield. The lesson of that day lingered in Ethan's heart. Sometimes the people who seem most distant are carrying the heaviest fights. And sometimes one moment of courage is all it takes to rebuild what was lost. What did this story make you feel? Where are you watching from? Subscribe to Soul Relief Stories for more real stories that heal the heart.